Hello there. Welcome to Lightside Chat. Um, I don't know about that name. Tell me what you think in the chat or in the comments if you're watching the rebroadcast about Lightside Chat. It's kind of a reference to like Fireside Chat, um, but I don't know. I just feel like Jasom Jensai Hangout is kind of a bad name too. So, I don't know. Welcome to Lightside Chat. Don't know about that name so far, but um, in this Lightside Chat, we're gonna be covering Mandalorian Chapter 14, the best Star Wars novels, the top 10 in my opinion, and yours if you can want to leave those in the chat. And the last thing we're going to cover is the TIE Defender. But first, let's get to the question of the stream. The question of this stream is, when does episode 4 take place ABY? So that's what time period is the movie in, and ABY is like it's a time system in Star Wars. So leave that in the chat. If you get it right, you get 10 points, but you only get one guess. You can't look it up, and there's a third rule that I'm forgetting. Only one person gets it, so the first person to guess right. So if you watch it live, you have a higher chance of getting it first, even though no one has gotten it first. So, I mean, you'd probably be just as good for now, just going in the comments. But hopefully later, and like, whenever I get more viewers, you want to watch live. But anyways, that's the question of the stream. When does episode 4 take place? Leave your guess or answer, if you know what it is, in the comments or the chat down below. But on to one of the main topics, and that is Chapter 14 of The Mandalorian. So this is the most recent episode, as of right now, where Mando goes to Tython, and by the way, just so you know, spoiler warning. Anyways, continuing, Mando goes to Tython. Baby Yoda calls a Jedi, but while he's doing that, Boba attacks, but it's not really an attack. And Fennec Shand is still alive and working with Boba because Boba saved her. And then the Empire attacks, and eventually Moff Gideon sends his Dark Troopers down, and they capture Baby Yoda. That's a brief summary of it. I really liked the episode. Probably not as much as most people. Same with the last episode. I feel like last episode and this episode kind of relied on nostalgia, and fan service has a lot of negative connotations, but it is fan service, just not done in a very bad way. But I feel like outside of the well done fan service, there wasn't very much to the story or the character development. It is very cool to me that Grogu got captured. That opens up a lot of very tense storytelling situations they can put the characters in. But yeah, Boba showing up, that was cool. I don't know quite how I feel about that. Boba and Mando hanging out is maybe a little bit weird to me at first. I feel like it all depends on what they do in the future of the show, on whether I like that. Yeah, but I'm just gonna hop right into some of the main points I want to address. One of the first is all about like Boba and all of his stuff. So the first thing is Boba is, well, technically not a Mandalorian, but Jango is technically a Mandalorian. And then Boba being a clone of his and a student of his, although he didn't like swear the creed or like do anything to other than be born to a foundling, he is like very similar to a Mandalorian in many key ways. So, and another thing interesting about that is they like recanonized the Mandalorian Civil Wars, which although that doesn't necessarily mean they happen in the same way, they could technically be like one battle where a bunch of Mandalorians send drones at each other or something stupid like that. But it adds like a key element of history back in there. And another thing they could do with Mandalorian Wars, and I don't know fully the story of them in Legends, but in canon what they could do is they could do, instead of like Death Watch versus the True Mandalorians, they could do the True Mandalorians versus New Mandalore, and that would be like Satine Wren and the Pacifists. And then Death Watch is like a splinter group, not a splinter group, like just a subsection of the True Mandalorians, and then they eventually become the Death Watch that takes over Mandalore again. yeah, and you know the story from there. That's just how I would do it if I was the storyteller, but obviously that's just a um, evidenceless theory, pretty much a hypothesis. Another thing to consider about Boba Fett is his skill level in this episode, which is a very big concern of mine because a lot of people, at least in my opinion, severely overrate Boba Fett. And it's not that he's a super bad, like not a very good warrior. He is very skilled. Um, and if you want to hear more of my thoughts on that, um, like go check out my Jango Fett versus Boba Fett video where I have obviously a whole section about how powerful I think Boba Fett is. It was a fun one to write. I think I had a really good description of the battle in that one. That was really cool. Great use of jetpacks. But one of my biggest concerns was that they were going to severely overrate Boba Fett, because from what we've seen of him outside of Legends, is in the Clone Wars he's pretty cool. Um, by cool I mean powerful. And then in Episode 5, he shoots at Luke that one time and tracks down Han Solo, which is impressive, but not like a feat of warrior skill. It's just he tracked down Han Solo. That's a different type of skill. Very useful for his job, which is how I see him. Is he's more of a hunter than a warrior, but still a really good warrior. And then the other thing we see him is in Episode 6, where he basically just makes a fool of himself. And not just that he got hit by Han, but how he went about taking on Luke was not very strategically sound. I don't know. He probably hasn't fought a Jedi before, other than... I know there's a comic about him where he fights Luke, but that was like very young Luke before he knew about the Force and stuff. And I think, yeah, he basically just got unlucky. I'd have to actually read the comic. I don't remember how I found out about it, but I think I saw like a few pictures of it or something. Anyways, I was very worried they were going to overrate Boba Fett, and I think they did a little bit, but they did it in a really good way. Instead of making him just like this fighting machine, like a Din Djarin, but better, and making him like super overpowered, like they did, like pretty much a lot of the comments that I don't like, that I see in other comment sections, that I'm like, he's not really that cool, guys. That's Legends. It doesn't make sense with the rest of the story. And it's just because he looks cool. But I think they did it in a very good way. They made him use a lot of sneak attacks. They made him use a very good use of his weapon, so lots of bombs. He has that knee thing. And the other thing is, although it looks super impressive, and I'm specifically thinking of that one scene where Din Djarin and Fennec Shand are like surrounded, and then Boba Fett comes in and takes out like 8 or 9 troopers. 5 troopers ran away after he shot 2 of them with his knee, which I don't know. I feel like that's the kind of thing that would make sense to me for him being very skilled, is just like how the fans seem to think he's just the best bounty hunter ever, so does the people in universe who just like see him and then just run away because he's so intimidating. But yeah, I think they did well with Boba Fett. Maybe a bit overrated, at least in my opinion. But that's a fine compromise for me, because so many fans expect him to be even better. And I think it's a good compromise between serving the fans, which is ultimately the goal of a story like that, kind of. I think it should be at least one of the major goals, and serving the logic of like the pre-established universe of it. Another thing is the child's power. In this, like, how powerful is the child? At the very end, he's like throwing around all those stormtroopers, which was super cool. Yeah, I don't know why I wrote this down as a point. There's not much to say. It's pretty consistent with the rest. Super powerful. One thing I do want to touch on is the like Seeing Stone and Tython. I don't know. That just felt a little bit non-force to me. Like, it's a lot like the World Between Worlds. It's like dependent on a location. It's an ancient mystical Jedi temple connecting everything. glowy stuff for no apparent reason. Like, I don't know. That's just not how the Force works to me. But I don't know. I guess you gotta have some mystical ancient things, and it's Tython. Like, I can forgive it. Um, Dark Troopers, we get to see those in action, and they look like they're basically Iron Man, at least for now. Until we see more of them, I'll probably just call them basically Iron Man. It's pretty cool. I'm excited to see them in combat rather than just flying down, menacingly walking forward, one of the four grabbing something and then flying back up. And not even evasive maneuvers. But yeah, they were cool to see. Cool to see in action. And yeah. What else? The First Order ships. Kind of. So those ships that the Stormtroopers came down, I should have looked at a picture of the First Order ships to kind of refresh my memory. But either they were the exact same model or they were like a predecessor. They're very close. It's at the very beginning of Episode 7. On Jakku, when all those troops go down with Kylo Ren and they kill Loras and Tekka and murder all the villagers. That scene. Those transports looked very similar. That's all I have to say. Well, okay. It shows that Moff Gideon is associated with the First Order, which was kind of revealed when he had like an almost Snoke clone, and I guess that's it. But like, I feel like Moff Gideon is definitely closely associated with the First Order, which is cool to see. I think that they should like try to explain some of like what happened in the sequel trilogy. A lot of fans are like, "Oh, don't even touch it," but I'm like, it's fine if you have a little bit. I feel like Mandalorian isn't like advertised as a sequel trilogy, like kind of like the Clone Wars is like, oh, it's the Clone Wars. It follows mostly Anakin and Obi-Wan, and also a new character called Ahsoka. But you're gonna see a lot of stuff from the prequels. Mandalorian is set a long time before then. You've got completely new characters. You're not necessarily expecting to see that, so I think they shouldn't delve into it as much as they did in the Clone Wars. But I think a little bit is actually good. So like what they've done so far, like in the first season, what do they do? I guess they showed the Empire. They showed the New Republic. Kind of. They mentioned the New Republic. Oh no, they did have the prison ship. That was New Republic. And then in the second season, they delve into a bit more. Third season, maybe a bit more. And as you get closer and closer to then, and also more into a more galactic view of the galaxy, because obviously the show started out small with just one guy and like a few planets. Now it's getting into like Ahsoka and Thrawn and Tython, more galactic struggles, more just grander. Which isn't necessarily better, but it's just different. The last question I have about this episode, or the last thing I really wanted that really stuck out to me as something to comment on, is who did Grogu call? Because that's like the main speculation from last episode is who is Grogu gonna see in the next episode. So there's been like Luke, Ezra, and Cal, of course. Some say like a Sith, some say a new Jedi. Personally, I don't know. It could go either way, and I just don't really feel there's any reason to speculate when there's like no clues. But I would love to see Ezra, but I don't think it makes sense in my like headcanon of what happened after Thrawn and Ezra went out of there, which is why I kind of don't want to see him, but at the same time I do because it'd be cool. And Thrawn's coming in, maybe not to this, maybe not to this TV show though. So it'd be cool to see Ezra, but I don't really want to see him that much. Luke, I don't want to see until later in the show, maybe like season 4 or 5. And I heard somewhere that there's only going to be 5 seasons. I don't know how true that is, but like if there is 5 seasons, I'd like to see him like season 4 or 5, rather than like a season 2. And if there's like 7 seasons, I'd like season 6 or 7, or you know what I mean. I want to see him near the end of it. Cal Kestis, I actually don't really want him to survive, like past A New Hope. Like I don't want him to make it to the Death Star blowing up. I don't know why, but I feel like he should get killed by Vader. I think it's because he had such a memorable encounter with Vader. But I don't really know why. Who else is there? A Sith. That would be very interesting. Although with the child gone, it would be much less interesting. Because the whole thing there is, oh, he gets taken by a Sith and is suddenly being trained. But I feel like it wouldn't really be that compelling if a Sith showed up and Mando was like, oh, hey, so you're the Jedi, and he's like, yes, I'm the Jedi. And then Mando eventually finds out and, I don't know, fights the Sith, which would be cool. But I think it's less interesting. You could have Moff Gideon be like training the child to use his dark side. Not like training him in the dark side. He's not like teaching him force lightning or anything, but just like helping him to tap into that potential of evil. Another option would be a Jedi we don't know, which could be good. Personally, my favorite option is a Jedi that we didn't know survived. So like, who do we not see die? We don't see, who is? I'm trying to think. Oh, Terra Sinube. We don't see him die. I mean, there's just so many Jedi. Chpt, we don't see die in a non-deleted scene, I believe. Although she dies twice in the deleted scenes, I think. Yeah, just some Jedi that we didn't know. Quinlan Voss, he's a good one. I'm really blanking on Jedi, but yeah, who are the Jedi? Like, Ithkoth died. Yeah, I don't know. Leave your top 3 Jedi in the chat. Yeah. But I think that's all for Mandalorian Chapter 14. Actually, I'll do a quick summary of my general thoughts about the episode. It was I really liked it. It was very entertaining and has a lot of plot ramifications, but it didn't have much, I don't know what the word is, but it wasn't that entertaining, like, by itself. It's very entertaining with all the, like, nostalgia that we saw with, like, Boba Fett and, the Empire. Although one thing, the Stormtroopers, they're, like, shoulder pads. I don't know if this bothered anyone else, but for me, the shoulder pads were really bothering me. I don't know what it is. I think they were maybe, like, too thin, or they were not hooked on tightly, and so they were, like, flapping. I'd have to, like, look at Stormtroopers next to each other and how they move. But I don't know. Those shoulder pads, weirdly, just could not get over those. Yeah, we saw, like, the Empire. We saw Boba Fett, Dark Troopers. And it's also very connected to the plot of the show with Grogu reaching out to a Jedi. So Mando almost gets his quest done, and then Moff Gideon comes in and gets his quest almost done. He just has to get under Dr. Parshing. So it's coming to a very climactic battle, hopefully. I can't imagine them not leading it to a climactic battle. But yeah, it's a good setup episode, but not super entertaining on its own. So that's my thoughts on Chapter 14. Leave yours in the comments. Let's move on to Star Wars novels, the top 10, in my opinion. And this is, to be specific, this is only the canon novels. I haven't read many of the Legends novels, but they're pretty good. The Bane trilogy, I've read that. It's very good. I read the Revan book. I think I just liked that because it was Revan, but I don't know. But yeah, the canon novels, I've read pretty much all of them, I think. There's like those like red and white ones or whatever that I haven't really read. Like they're not at my library or something, so. So let's go through from the 10th all the way up to the 1st. The first one, or the 10th one, is, in my opinion, is Star Wars, or not Star Wars, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and that's actually the one that's almost in the top right corner. It's one to the left of that, in the thumbnail slash picture on screen, the Star Wars novels picture. And I don't know, it was just a good book, and it's one thing that it actually very impacted me on is my favorite Star Wars planet is Alderaan, and that's mostly because of this book. Leia being Princess of Alderaan, that's like the whole point of the book. Yeah, it was a very good book to read. There was lots of little nods to like Padme and the beginnings of the rebellion. That's a big thing. Yeah, it's a good read. And by the way, I'm gonna try and keep the spoilers light on these. Maybe I'll go through like at the end of the after the next segment and all that, and I'll go through like a more in-depth spoiler review. If you guys want to talk about like a specific one or something, leave that in the chat if you want like a full spoiler, for one in the chat, and I'll get to that at the end. But I don't really want to have like people have to like try and like plug their ears or skip ahead. It's live, so you can't really skip ahead. So I'm just gonna do like if it's spoilers, it's gonna be like the first few chapters of the book, or like the general what it covers. But anyways, Leia Princess of Alderaan is just a very good depiction of a young Leia trying to prove herself to her parents. The next one up from that, number 9 on the list, is Catalyst. And this one you can barely see. It's on the top left of the picture again. And I don't know, it's just... this one I don't really remember that well, but I remember it was pretty good. It's like a prequel to Rogue One. So it's got stuff about like Galen Erso and his project on the Death Star, which and how who is it? What's his name? Director Krennic was like manipulating him to work on that, and it's got some very interesting ramifications for kyber crystal technology. That's all I've got to say about that one. Number 8 on this list is Tarkin, and this is where things get really good. The other two were kind of like, oh yeah, they were cool books. You should definitely read them. But Tarkin, this is a great book. Again, a lot of these books are, they don't have that much. They don't have like a super cool plot or the coolest setting. Well, I mean, the setting is Star Wars. So they don't have like a very creative setting. They don't. But the main like draw to the books, at least from what I've read, is they're very great at like getting into the minds of a character and kind of explaining like who that character is. For example, the Leia Princess of Alderaan book. It's all about like it's got a plot, but really what it is it's how like what is Leia like and what is she thinking? What are her struggles and her strengths and all that. And it's really cool cuz with a book you can like describe their thoughts and feelings the way you can in a movie here, a TV show, or a comic, and even a game. And game is really the worst because you can't even tell because of facial expressions, well, maybe facial expressions, but like outside of cutscenes, you're controlling the character. The character is you. So the character essentially has to have like no specific like personality. But with books you can get really into the personality of a character, and they really harness that and use it very well, which is why some of the best books are up here. Super cool. Tarkin is a lot like that. It delves into the backstory of Tarkin, and it is super interesting, super vicious is the word I would use to describe it. And it also has his relationship with Vader, and he's got a like cool ship. Yeah, just a cool book about Tarkin, and that's why its name's Tarkin. The next book on this list is Star Wars Bloodline, and this one is less about, and this is like a Leia book. Leia's like the main character, but it's not so much about Leia as Leia Princess of Alderaan. This one actually has, like, the main focus is I would say, on the plot and like this specific time in history. This is like right as the First Order is becoming to be, it's like right when it's being discovered, not by like the known galaxy. It's not like Force Awakens. The First Order blows up Bosnian Prime. Boom! Everyone suddenly knows about the First Order and they're terrified. This is like more. Oh, some of the people are beginning to discover that there is this remnant of the Empire in the unknown regions and all that. But Bloodline is a great book. It delves into a lot of what Leia is doing during this time. It's got a great scene, great reveal about it. It's yeah, it's just a great scene. And if you want, I can talk more about that. In fact, you know what? I'll probably talk about this one. It's hard to talk about this one without spoilers. Probably because this one, like I said, is more focused on the plot than the other ones. So I'll talk about this later. After the the TIE Defender segment. But moving on to the next one. This one is another great book, Master and Apprentice. This one is all about Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan and their relationship, at least in the beginning, and how it starts to become more like the relationship that we see them have in The Phantom Menace. And Qui-Gon is one of the best characters. He doesn't have that much written about him. He's got I think he has one comic. He's in one movie, one book. And he's kind of he's seen in one arc of the Clone Wars, and the Mortis arc he's kind of seen, but I don't know if that's really him. I think it was. He seemed to act like it. But anyways, Qui-Gon Jinn is in this book. He's pretty cool. Obi-Wan is also in this book. He's also cool, and I think you get to see because you get to see his beginnings, you get to kind of appreciate his progression more. In this book, he's kind of rigid. He's following whatever the Jedi Council says. He's not very confident in his own opinions, so he just relies on the Council. And of course, Qui-Gon does not do that. As we can see a little bit in the Phantom Menace, but even more in this book, he's kind of a rebel. And that's something I very much I respect about him, is he doesn't just blindly follow. He thinks for himself, considers every angle, and that's part of what makes him such a good detective in this book, because they're trying to solve who's it's basically try to find who did the thing. An ongoing thing though. It's not like who broke into this building. It's like who's attacking this place and where are they? And another character in this book is Rael Averross. And Rael Averross is such a cool character. He's definitely not a good role model, but he's very interesting. I don't know. He's another of Count Dooku's apprentices, and I think it's in this book that we actually see a bit of Qui-Gon being trained by Dooku. That might be a different book that I'm thinking of, but I think it's in this book. And Rael Averross has been friends with Qui-Gon for since his first mission with Dooku, and he's kind of showed him how to be a good apprentice to Dooku. Because of course he was Dooku's apprentice before. So it was cool to see Qui-Gon Jinn interacting with Rael Averross and Count Dooku and Obi-Wan. And also the planet that they go to is also very interesting. I like their philosophy. It's basically instead of having all their rich and cool looking stuff on the outside, they have it all on the inside. So their lanterns are just kind of simple, but then on the inside they've got nice engravings and all that. And then their clothing is very drab, except they have little cuts through it that reveal super colorful, super soft looking, great fancy interiors, which is very interesting. I don't know. I like that philosophy. I like that architectural style and clothing style, I guess. Super interesting. And then also there was the colon crystals, which are very interesting. I think I like learning about kyber crystals, um, which Catalyst is on here. What was that? Number 9, and then Master and Apprentice, which both talk about kyber crystals a bit. Yeah, so just a good book, a great mission for Anakin, or not Anakin, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and kind of shows their relationship and the relationships to other characters. Again, it's a very like character-driven um, book about. That sounds silly. It's a character-driven book. Anyways, moving on to number 5. This book is Thrawn Alliances. Um, and I think just like when Tarkin showed up, or the Tarkin book showed up, this is another step up in. Well, actually, you know what? Master and Apprentice can be here too. Master and Apprentice. Yeah. So it seems it's going by twos. Maybe Bloodline is up here too. I think this is just generally getting higher, as you would expect from a list of top 10. Thrawn Alliances is a great book. If you don't know who Thrawn is, he's the blue guy from Rebels. If you haven't seen Rebels, you should go watch Rebels. If you haven't read the Thrawn books, you should just read the Thrawn books. They're great. There's 3 of them. And as you can expect, the other 2 are higher up on this list too. Thrawn Alliances is a great book. Darth Vader's in it. Thrawn's in it. They're interacting. I can't speak apparently. I just disproved that I can't speak because I'm speaking and telling you about how I can speak. Anyways, Thrawn and Vader are interacting, and at the same time as that's happening, or not really the same time, and in between chapters about that, they're having Thrawn interact with Anakin earlier, like during the Clone Wars, and it's a very interesting dynamic, kind of seeing how Thrawn is like using his intelligence to needle at Vader and be like, and just talking to him, and to see the older Thrawn, how he interacts, and compare that to how he interacted when he was younger, but also how he interacts with someone like Anakin and how Anakin responds, and how Vader responds, and how Thrawn interacts with him. Another thing about this is Thrawn's loyalty is being questioned, which is very interesting, because he's not quite as good at politics as you'd expect for someone of his intelligence. So with his loyalty being questioned, pretty much all he can do is be like, is just serve the Empire and just be the good general that he is, and just say, hey, I am actually loyal. You don't have to distrust me. But yeah, it was they go a little bit into the unknown regions. They meet other Chiss. It's a great story. Moving on to number 4 is Lost Stars, and this book is on the top right corner of the screen. It's actually a really good book. Even though if you told me the plot of this book, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'll read it. Sure, it's Star Wars. But it's a really, really well-written book. It's got great scenes. It's this one is, again, a character study, but it's not a character you know. It's 2 characters that you just meet. And they're basically going through... it's during the time of the rebellion in the Empire. And those 2 characters end up on opposite sides. And other than you should read it, and you should really read it, and the third thing is you should really, really read it. That's all I'm going to say. It's a great book. Has a great ending, and I hope they make a number 2. That's one thing I will say. But moving on to number 3 is Dark Disciple. And this is another awesome one that, again, if you told me the plot, I'd be like, sure, that sounds fine. This one I think I would like a little bit better based on the plot, but again, the characterization and the actual writing of it is very well done, and this one you can see about the top 3/4 of the book cover on the bottom left, but one to the right. So not the one with like the blue Star Wars, but the red, and that's Asajj Ventress and Quinlan Vos. And those are the 2 like main characters of the story. Quinlan Vos, very cool character. He's great in that one Clone Wars episode we see him in, and also in this book, which really expands on his character, and his his philosophy and how he thinks. And then there's also Ventress, who is also cool to see. She's also great in the Clone Wars. I wouldn't say she's better in this, but she's also good in this. Um, she's a bounty hunter at this point, and Quinlan Voss is sent to assassinate Count Dooku after the Jedi Council is like, well, it's for the greater good. I guess we can assassinate people now. Yeah, we're selfless. Quinlan Voss gets sent to kill Count Dooku, but he doesn't get sent to do it alone. He's supposed to find Asajj Ventress and work with Ventress, which is a very interesting dynamic, considering, well, Quinlan Voss is just a very carefree, joyful. I don't know. He's not like super immature or anything. When he needs to be, but he does make jokes a lot. He does have fun with his job. He doesn't just stand around solemnly. He doesn't wear Jedi robes. That's another interesting thing. Yeah, he's just a cool guy. And then Ventress, of course, is all there like, I'm Ventress, I'm spooky and alone, and Dooku betrayed me. Ah! And Quinlan Voss is just like laughing at it, and I don't know. Their personalities interact very well, and yeah, very well. That's what I'm going to say about that book. You should definitely read that one. And you should also read the next two on this list, which number 2 is Thrawn Treason. This is the third book in the Thrawn trilogy. This one is, as you can tell from the title, delves a lot more into that distrust between the Emperor and Thrawn, or I suppose the distrust of Thrawn by the Empire or Emperor. So I think I explained that very poorly. The Emperor, which is a hard word to say, is distrusting Thrawn, which was brought up in Thrawn alliances and now is being expanded upon and is basically the purpose of Thrawn treason. And this one it doesn't have, I'm trying to remember the plot. I think this one was, right, Thrawn is trying to get the TIE Defender project to get funded, but the Death Star, of course, is taking up a lot of funds too. And Thrawn, of course, being the smart man that he is, kind of knows about the Death Star and is, yeah, it's a good book. It's a lot more, I don't know what to say. I think it just delves into the Thrawn a bit more than the second one. And also his crew and his, like the first one, it delves a lot more into Thrawn and Eli Vanto. The second one delves a lot more into Thrawn and Anakin / Vader, and the third one is like Thrawn and his crew. Speaking of the first one, my favorite book out of all those Star Wars canon novels is Thrawn, the first one of the trilogy. It's just called Thrawn. And this one you should definitely read. If there is one book I would suggest to someone who hasn't read any Star Wars novels, would I suggest Thrawn? I think I would suggest, well, it depends on what era you like. If you like the prequels, I would suggest Dark Disciple, probably. Actually, Master and Apprentice. I'll go with Master and Apprentice. So if you like the prequels, I would suggest Master and Apprentice. If you like the originals, I would definitely suggest The Lost Stars. If you like the sequels, maybe Phasma. I don't know. Yeah, you might like Phasma. If you like the sequels, they haven't made like a super standout one in the sequels. But Phasma is pretty good and kind of has it's not super Star Warsy, but it's still a good book. And it has a sequel which I think is more of the flavor of the sequels. That one's called Black Spire, but that's a sequel, so you should read Phasma first. But if you have read a few novels and you're like, oh, what's a really good one? Thrawn. That's like the best one in my opinion. Just a great book. Again, like most of them, it's all about like a specific character, and this one is all about Thrawn, and also a bit about Eli Vanto. I would say they're about like the co-focus of the book. Kind of like how Master and Apprentice is Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. Um, but yeah, Thrawn, it's the best book. It's all about him like becoming like what happened to him before Rebels, before you see him in Rebels, and how he got to that rank, because he's an alien from the unknown regions, and the Empire is they basically employ pretty much only humans. Um, yeah, like how is a blue skinned alien with red eyes who looks pretty weird gonna get elevated to such a high rank? And it's because of his like just his intelligence, which is so fascinating to read about. Um, so yeah, definitely pick up that book, read it. But with all that said, um, canon novels are just great. I would highly suggest reading pretty much all of them. But especially these top 10, they're all super cool. Those are my suggestions for those. But let's move on to the next segment, which is the TIE Defender. And this is kind of like how powerful is how powerful is Ahsoka Tano, and how powerful is like what else have I done? Darth Sidious. This is kind of like that kind of segment. But how powerful is the TIE Defender is kind of the wrong word, and some of the other ones I've done is how skilled is the TIE Defender. Doesn't make sense at all. How strong is the TIE Defender? Doesn't really make sense. So I just said TIE Defender. Let's call it that. This is less well known than something like Ahsoka or Darth Sidious, or Count Dooku. So I'm actually also going to do a bit of a like history, like how did it come to be and that kind of thing. Where is it seen? So anyways, the TIE Defender is seen in Rebels. I think that's all it's seen in. And it might be in what's it called? Star Wars, whatever the new ship game is. I'm not big into video games, so I haven't played that. But TIE Defender, it might be in that, but I think it's only in Rebels. And this was actually a design, or at least an idea started by Thrawn, who, remember from the last segment, Thrawn is really smart. Great book. You should definitely read those and watch Rebels too. The TIE Defender is, I think it could have saved the Empire. I don't know if it would have, but there's a pretty strong likelihood it would. If only Thrawn is better at politics, but I guess not. Maybe when he gets older. The TIE Defender, instead of focusing on like a giant Death Star laser that gets blown up pretty quickly, it can only be the Death Star can only be in one place at once, and the whole philosophy behind it is, why would anyone rebel when their planet could get blown up, just completely gone? And that's like the whole philosophy behind it, is ruling by fear. But obviously that kind of backfired, because people were like, you blew up Alderaan, that's evil, I'm going to join the rebels. So that whole plan backfired, in addition to the Death Star just getting blown up on like day one, which of course offered hope to the galaxy. I mean, if planets had continued to get blown up, the rebellion might have just been over. But Galen Erso betrayed it, and how they kept the Death Star secret, that's just incredible. Like Saw Gerrera had like hints of it. The rebellion probably had a few hints, but like that, it's a huge space station, and like no one talked about it pretty much, other than a few people. But anyways, the Death Star is a massive project, very expensive, but what I think would have been a better use of resources is investing into TIE Defenders. These are basically TIE fighters, except they were like a million times better. TIE fighters don't have any shields, so like one shot and they're dead. But TIE Defenders, like, they almost never get, like, their shields almost never break. Like, what was it? It was the first time you see them, like one of the first TIE Defenders, I suppose one of the first that gets sent into combat. They're chasing the Ghost and Gold Squadron, which is the Y-Wings. I believe there were 5 of them there, maybe 4. anyways, a TIE Defender and two interceptors, TIE interceptors, chased the Ghost and five Y-wings into like a nebula, and the TIE Defender took out like I don't think the TIE interceptors shot a single shot, and the TIE Defender took out all but two of Gold Squadron, and made the Ghost have to like run away. Very incredible, just and that's like its first test. Then there's the TIE Defender Elite, which was just a later design that was even better. But anyways, back to the shields. The TIE Defender seemed to have about the same amount of shields as the Ghost, which is a much bigger ship. I don't know, like, I suppose Star Destroyer shields probably are a lot more defensive than, like, a Starfighter, and Starfighters don't blow holes in Star Destroyers, usually. So I would assume that, like, the Millennium Falcon and the Ghost, the Tantive 4, those would have bigger shields than your average Starfighter. But the TIE Defender has extremely good shields. Other than the Nebula and crashes, which crashes don't really count, the TIE Defender shield is like, it's never broken. So that's, like, it's shields. That's the first thing. Super good. Another thing, it's maneuverability, which was really good. I mean, it's not like it's like what do I have about maneuverability? There was a ship it was keeping up with, I think, but I forgot, and it's in my notes. Yeah, Speed Rival's A-wings. So A-wings are like the fastest ships, in the Rebellion, and TIE Defenders were keeping up with those. I don't remember the scene that's in, but like they're at least comparable speeds. Faster than like X-wings, Y-wings for sure. TIE Defenders very fast as well as have great shields. But another thing, one of the best things about TIE Defenders is their maneuverability. Not only were they fast, but they could like turn. They had like they would spin and they'd like go to the side. That's one of their most common maneuvers, and it's very effective. But also they had super powerful guns. They would take out most ships like X-wings, who have a little bit of shields, but not quite as much as a TIE Defender. They would take out those ships in like one shot, maybe two or three, but just a few shots, and it's just gone. And they have 6 cannons, so like that's one volley, half of your shots miss, and it's still taken out. Then they also have hyperdrives, which means they can like move without a capital ship. They don't have to get deployed every time the capital ship goes in to a battle. They can just show up ready to fight. They've got missiles. That's a huge plus. Like just look at Slave 1 versus Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones. Missiles are a huge part of that fight. And are what allows Slave 1 to escape. Missiles are super important, and TIE Defenders have those. So they've got shields, missiles, hyperdrives, great maneuverability, just all around really good ships. They are expensive, but I think they would be a worthy investment. I can't think of a better starfighter. Like they're easily the best, from what I can tell. So leave your thoughts about TIE Defenders. If you had never heard of them, like check them out for sure. They're featured quite a bit in Thrawn Alliances. I don't think they're used in Thrawn. They might be used in Thrawn Treason. They weren't as big of a deal there, I think. Or were they used there? I don't know. I get those stories mixed up. It's all one story, right? So, anyways, they're featured pretty heavily in a few episodes of Rebels. It's like the main focus. Although throughout most of Rebels, they're not really shown that much. But they're also a pretty big deal in the Thrawn books. Not the first one, but the second two for sure. Yeah, great ships. Best starfighter, in my opinion. I don't know what else would be better. I mean, I suppose the Mandalorian ships. I don't know if those are starfighters, though. because they can carry like several Mandalorians. So those would be kind of like, but they fly like starfighters though. Huh. I guess to me they don't seem like starfighters because they can carry too many people, but at the same time they fly around like they fight like starfighters. They're kind of fast and have line of sight guns rather than swivel turrets, which is a lot of mid class and upper class ships. But anyways, that's the TIE Defender. Leave your thoughts about those in the comments or the chat. But that's all three of the topics. So I'm just gonna recap real quick. First, before we get to the topics, the question of the stream. Leave your answer in the chat or in the comments. When does episode 4 take place? ABY. Next, we discussed chapter 14 of The Mandalorian. Great episode. I think this one was more of a setup episode. It relied a lot on the major plot points of The Mandalorian and the major characters of the rest of Star Wars. But it was still a very good episode. There's a lot of good choreography in it. And Boba Fett, yeah, it was great to see Boba Fett. I like, one thing I didn't mention is I like his, like, how his black cloth looks underneath the armor. It's very cool looking. But I also discussed my top 10 favorite Star Wars novels. Leia, Princess of Alderaan, Catalyst, Tarkin, Bloodline, Master and Apprentice, Thrawn Alliances, Lost Stars, Dark Disciple, Thrawn Treason, and Thrawn. All great books. You should definitely read them all, especially, just read all the books. Takes a while, but you'll get through it, and it's awesome. We also discussed the TIE Defender, awesome ship. Thrawn had a big hand in that. I'd love to see more of it. If it's in Star Wars Squadrons, that's probably like the biggest reason for me to buy that game. I'd love to fly it. I'd love to see it in more content. Ooh, you know what'd be cool if the First Order had like a future version of the TIE Defender. That would have been cool. And maybe they'll do that in like an animated show and kind of retcon, say, oh, it wasn't in this episode because blah blah blah. Kind of like they did with TIE Interdictors and Rebels. Which, by the way, TIE Interdictors, they're those ships that create gravity wells so that they suck ships out of hyperspace. Assuming they didn't take out that thing like they did in the Millennium Falcon to get to Starkiller Base. Anyways, TIE Interdictors, or not TIE Interdictor, Star Interdictor, whatever. Those Interdictor ships, those are pretty cool. Kind of like the TIE Defender, very useful. But with all that being said, leave your comments, your critiques, compliments, questions, leave all those in the comments. Or if you're watching live, leave it in the chat. But until next time, may the Force be with you, always.